Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
Welcome to the World Wanderers podcast. This episode is brought to you by the supporters of the show on Patreon. If you are a fan of the show and want to help us continue and become the first travel podcast to become a space travel podcast, you can go to patreon.com/theworldwanderers and support the show.
Yeah, so on to today's episode. We are talking about our recent 2-month stay in Bali, Indonesia. And so we're going to start with a little bit of context as to when we went to Bali, why we went to Bali, and all of that good stuff. So the last location-based episode that you would have listened to on the podcast was when we were in Myanmar. So we left Myanmar and we made our way to Bangkok, where our big bags were stored. And we spent about a week in Bangkok just kind of regrouping. We didn't really even do much in Bangkok, eh?
No.
And so after a week in Bangkok, we flew to Denpasar, which is the only airport in Bali, and began our 2-month stay there. So do you want to talk a little bit about what our original plan for Bali was?
Sure. So going into Bali, we knew that we were going to spend a month there and probably a little bit more. This is something that we had planned almost basically before we had even started in Asia at all. So last fall, we had decided, okay, we want to spend a month in Bali. We found this really cool co-working space, and we're like, yeah, we're going to do that for a month. So going into our trip there, we had booked a room in Ubud, and we're planning on going a month, but we got the visas that are capable of extending. So we thought, okay, maybe we'll stay 6 weeks and then go from Bali to Ho Chi Minh before going to Japan for the month of April.
Yeah, and so our next sort of like leg of the trip is Japan. We knew that April 4th was our day that we're meeting our friends, and we were arriving in Bali January 21st. So we're like, okay, maybe we'll stay till March 4th and then go to Ho Chi Minh City for a month and kind of experience another cool digital nomad expat hub. And so because of those time differences, we knew we would have to extend our visa in Bali. And so something that's important to know, obviously it's different country to country, but Canada, US, it's free to go into Bali for 30 days. If you plan on extending at all, though, you need to pay for your visa on arrival when you arrive in Denpasar at the airport. And so we were pretty certain that we were going to extend past a month, but probably not stay 2 months. So we paid the $35 US fee right off the get-go to get the visa on arrival slip. And so that's really important. If you want to extend, you have to pay for that. And you have to pay for it at the airport in order to be able to do that. So we got our visa on arrival slip, and then we made our way to Canggu for the first couple days of our stay in Bali, which was something I was really excited about. If you've been following along the podcast since its birth a couple years ago.
Inception.
I hate the word inception. Conception. Yeah, you would know that I did
since we birthed it.
Yeah, since we created it, gave life to it. You would know that I did my yoga teacher training in Canggu 2 years ago. So I was super excited to go back and to take Ryan with me and to kind of re-experience Canggu with you by my side. I think I was more excited for that than you were. Would you agree?
A little bit. So when we were in Myanmar, we weren't doing much work, and then we kind of came back to Bangkok, and we were both kind of recovering from being sick. And so by the time we got to Ubud, to Bali, we both had some projects that we were working on and some deadlines that were approaching. So at my point, I was kind of like eager to get started on spending a bit more time doing that. And I didn't know anything about Canggu, so I didn't really have any expectations other than like, okay, we'll go here for a few days. It's by the beach. And we had a nice guest house there and a good time just eating good food, watching the sunset by the beach for a couple of days before heading up to Ubud for a month.
Yeah, and Canggu is really like a tiny little surf town. There's a lot of Australians there, a lot of people just kind of visiting. It's got the beach, which is really beautiful. There's some great places to practice yoga. There actually is a co-working space there, which we didn't find out about until after we'd already arrived in Ubud, but definitely like a cool place to hang out and do some work. There's so many good restaurants there.
Yeah. And so Bali I think for people who haven't been, you may not expect how many different spots there are that are good places to go.
Yeah. Seminyak is cool. There's co-working spaces there, great restaurants, good beaches, good beach clubs that you can go hang out in. And then Ubud obviously has a couple cool co-working spaces, great expat community, lots of yoga. And
so for context, Ubud is kind of central Bali, not on the coast.
Yeah. And then Canggu and Seminyak are really close to each other, and they're on sort of the southwest coast, north of Uluwatu, which is a famous place to go and surf and visit the temple and whatnot. And so after 2 days in Canggu, which was basically just us practicing yoga, watching the sunset, and eating good food, we made our way up to Ubud, and we got settled pretty quickly there. Would you say?
Yeah, I think so. So Ubud is a pretty small town. There's a few main streets where the tourist stuff is, and then it is a little bit bigger outside of that, but the core of the city is quite small, very walkable. And so we got our memberships at the co-working space, we got a membership at a yoga studio, and we kind of found some really good restaurants that we liked eating at that were in between all those things, and just kind of settled into a routine over the next couple of days.
Yeah, so the co-working space that we were working at is Hubud. I consistently pronounce it wrong, and it's located right across the street from Monkey Forest. We actually had a hard time finding it the first time we went, but once we did, we walked in, and it's this cool little sort of like almost, is it made out of like bamboo?
It's a bamboo building.
Yeah, and there's a downstairs, there's a conference room, there's a little outside patio area that sometimes has monkeys that come and visit or harass, with a little cafe with good treats, and then there's an upstairs area that kind of reminds me of a little bamboo tree house, which became my favorite place to work while we were there. And best internet in Ubud, apparently. So that's kind of an interesting thing about being somewhere like Ubud, is you can go, or Bali in general, is you can go and you can have this sort of expat life, but if you need to do calls or anything like that, you kind of do need to go to a co-working space, because the internet is like fairly crap anywhere else.
Yeah, at most of the guest houses, you could occasionally watch YouTube videos, but Skype calls were really spotty. A lot of times they would just kind of not be working well at all. And that's a pretty common experience around a lot of the places. So if you were coming to Bali and needed to stay connected and needed to do calls with people, definitely getting a membership at a co-working studio
space. So we're going to touch a little bit on the things that we did in Bali that would be interesting as a tourist, but the main purpose of this episode is to kind of talk about how we set up our life sort of in Bali. And a lot of people do that. There's a ton of expats in Bali. There's a ton of people who are on social visas for 6 months or 1 year who essentially, quote unquote, live in Bali. And that was kind of our intention for the month, is like not, how many shrines can we see? How many temples can we visit? It was about, how can we set up a regular routine or a regular life in Bali? And we talked a little bit on a couple different episodes about how that was really our main intention for coming to Asia is, we're starting businesses, we're starting working for ourselves, but we're not making enough money to really set up life in Canada. So let's go to Asia where it's more affordable to live and do that. And if you've been following along with our trip in Asia, you'd know that we ended up traveling a lot more than we ever intended to in the first kind of, I guess, three months of our trip. And Chiang Mai was the first time that we kind of settled down for 1 month and got a lot of work done. Then we took this trip to Myanmar. We're in Bangkok, and then we got to Bali and we're like, okay, let's like set up life here. Like, let's make regular routines. So right off the get-go, we bought our co-working space membership for 1 month. We got passes to Yoga Barn, which is really close to Ubud, the co-working space that we were working at, and kind of got into this regular rhythm of life. So do you want to talk a little bit about like what day-to-day life looked like in Bali?
Sure. Yeah. So we had yoga studio memberships, and then our membership at the co-working spot. And then we were staying about 10 minutes away from both of those effectively. So it was kind of a bit of a triangle. And,
walking, that is. And lots of people get scooters in Bali, but we didn't venture into that realm of life there.
Yeah, so a ton of people get scooters. And one thing you kind of notice if you stay in Bali for a while is you'll see all these tourists with bandaged up knees, or even going to yoga classes, people would put up their hands and say, oh yeah, I got a shoulder injury.
Happened yesterday.
When I crashed the scooter I was on. So we didn't do that too much. We did a little bit, which we'll talk about later. And so, yeah, our day was basically wake up, go do yoga, go work for a while, hang out in the afternoon, come back, do a bit more work, go get a good dinner somewhere, go home, read, go to bed.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Yeah, it was either yoga in the morning or yoga in the evening. There was lots of early morning classes that we really enjoyed, and then it's kind of like 7:30 a.m. or kind of like 7 p.m. But Bali is very, very hot, and we actually watched it transition from rainy season to dry season, and it went from being extremely humid and hot and rainy to still humid and hot, but a little bit drier and a little bit more hot. And so the afternoons were kind of a harder time to work, especially in the co-working space, because it got quite hot. So it's kind of like mornings are a really good time for work. We'd go for a good lunch and then kind of take a bit of a break in the afternoon and then do another work session. And something that's really interesting about kind of setting up your own schedule and setting up your own life is figuring out what times work best for you to work. And we kind of found that morning session and then kind of late afternoon, early evening session was the best setup for us while in Bali.
And Ubud is a really cool place to be for a while because there's a strong community of expats there. It's become kind of a yoga hub. So there's all the kind of food scene that you would expect in a town that's very popular for yoga. And just people kind of coming in to be healthy, to take care of themselves. There's amazing restaurants, but that are still really affordable because you're in Bali. And compared to a lot of the other places in Asia, it's really easy to eat healthy, which was really good for us because we had been sick in Myanmar not too long before. And just traveling Asia in general, not eating a ton of vegetables, health kind of slides slowly down. So it was great to just be able to eat lunch at a really good restaurant, eat dinner at a really good restaurant. And it wasn't the type of thing where you're eating unhealthy and kind of like a glutton. You're like, oh, I'm eating good food that's also really healthy.
Yeah, and we have a blog post up on theworldwanderers.com with our favorite restaurants in Ubud. But great place if you're gluten-free, vegetarian, paleo. If you're into any of sort of those health trends, Ubud definitely. And I think Canggu Center, all those places.
Yeah, anywhere in Bali, even Seminyak too, when we went down there for a day trip, the food is a little bit more expensive there, but you do have more options. Basically everywhere on the island, really good food.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting in Ubud because so you can still live on the cheap. We started doing something that we called $10 Tuesday, which was we would each only spend $10 on food for the day. And we could still eat really well like that, but we were definitely spending more like 25 each in the day, which for Asia might sound a little bit expensive, but it's got to be in the context of like what we are eating. It's like wheatgrass shots, really good green juices, really good like fruit smoothies with no extra added sugar, gluten-free vegan pizzas, like vegetarian nasi goreng. Like the food that you're getting is just so good. If you're into that scene, if you're listening, you're like, oh, I don't want to spend that much money on food, and like, I don't really care what's in my food or whatever.
Yeah, it's still, if you are on a really tight budget, it's still a good place to be because there are lots of Indonesian places where you can go get really cheap food.
Yeah, I saw Warungs where you could get, nasi goreng for 15,000 rupiah, which is 1.5 Canadian dollars. So less than $1 US.
Yeah. And at the restaurants, smoothies are quite expensive. So you'll pay 4 Canadian dollars for a smoothie and 4 Canadian dollars for a meal. And so if you cut out the smoothies, you're eating really cheap as well.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting being there because we decided to set up kind of life in Bali or be in Asia because it's cheaper than Canada. And then it's interesting thinking about like how much money we were spending, because it got to a point where I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't spend like, $3 on a wheatgrass shot, or I shouldn't spend like $4 on this smoothie. And then I would think to myself, how much would this be at home? To get like a sugar-free green juice is definitely more than $4 at your average like health food restaurant at home. Or to get like a gluten-free pizza is, I don't even know how much it is at home.
Yeah,
probably like $20
like
at least.
That quality food is like a third of the price.
Yeah.
That it would be back home. And so it's a really cool place. And I think that's why you see so many people who are working remotely come to Bali and get co-working memberships, because you can get a really high standard of life there without much sacrifice at a really affordable price.
Yeah. And so basically, life went, as Ryan explained, day to day. And then we kind of had one scheduled day off a week. And then maybe a couple afternoons here and there to explore a little bit. Since I had already spent a month in Bali before, I had seen places like obviously Canggu and Seminyak, Uluwatu, Monkey Forest, Mount Batur. And we did Canggu. We went down to Seminyak for a day. Do you want to talk a little bit about our day in Seminyak?
Sure. Yeah. So we took a day trip down there. Seminyak is a beach town, one of the more popular resort towns, kind of like the place to be type of area.
Yeah,
would you say that's her?
Yeah, I think so. It's super close to Kuta, but a little bit nicer than Kuta. So I think that people go there. You can stay at really nice places for affordable. If you are into the party scene, Kuta's right there. I think Kuta has some of the best clubs in the world, apparently. Not what we did, but I think you can go do like EDM clubs and stuff.
Yeah, so Kuta is a popular place to go for the party scene, and Seminyak kind of maybe fuses a bit of like a middle ground between Ubud and Kuta.
Yeah, and so we went down there. It was my 28th birthday, so we went down and went to Potato Head Beach Club, which is somewhere neither of us had been before. And I had only heard a little bit about it, so kind of based off the name Potato Head, I kind of got this idea that it was not a very nice establishment, maybe somewhere that people just went to hang out, like a party beach club, but it seemed to be really popular. So we're like, let's go just check it out, see if it's our scene. And I was really impressed. It's a very classy establishment.
Yeah. Classy might not even describe it. It's like a first class type of place with this beautiful infinity pool overlooking the ocean. You get kind of treated like you're some sort of king. A little bit expensive, but a really fun place to go spend the day, especially if, like, for us, where it's kind of a little bit of like a celebration. It's your birthday. We've also been like getting shit done. So we're like, yeah, let's go take a day off and just celebrate the fact that we're crushing it.
Yeah, definitely. It was a really fun day. I think it was one of the best days we took off while we were in Bali. It was fun to get out of Ubud and go to the coast, and the coasts in Bali have some of the most spectacular sunsets. So if you're going to Bali and you're planning to set up kind of life in Ubud, definitely go check out one of the coasts at some point and be there for a sunset. Yeah.
And so we were there for rainy season. So we were there probably 3 weeks rainy season, 4 weeks dry season.
Yeah.
And the switch really was perfect for us because it was getting to the point where it was just raining so much that we were like, I don't know if we can deal with this anymore. And then kind of like miracle, rainy season's over. But we got really lucky when we went down to Seminyak because it was the first clear day for a while, watched a beautiful sunset, went and had great Mexican food after, and just had this like pristine day. And it really gave me a good impression of Seminyak.
Yeah, definitely.
It seems like there's a ton of good restaurants. There's a ton of cool similar beach club places. The beach is really nice. There's a lot of good resorts there. If we were to come back to Bali for 2-3 weeks, I think that's definitely someplace we would spend a little bit of time.
Yeah, for sure. And then we also spent a day down in Sanur, which is actually the other side. So kind of the same distance from Ubud, but on the East Coast. And we went down to visit our friend Nathan, who's foodieflashpacker.com. You should go check out his blog. He was our friend from Chiang Mai, and we missed giving him a shout out. So there's your shout out, Nathan. It was awesome that we'd met him in Chiang Mai and we had hung out with him there. And then he happened to be in Bali at the same time as us, and our paths overlapped. Well, we were in Ubud. He was in Sinur, only about an hour away. And I had never been to Sinur before. It was a place that I'd kind of heard about. It's a cool little town on the coast as well.
Yeah, another place where there's lots of good places to eat, some decent beaches to go to. Definitely worth checking out. And just to comment on the Nathan point, Bali is a really cool place because it is such a hub for people to come travel to. And so for us, we've been making a travel podcast for a while, gotten to know some other people who are travel bloggers, and even with some of our other interests. There was a lot of connections and people we knew who had come by Bali, and we had the opportunity to meet up with quite a few friends while we were there and meet some new people as well. So that was one of the great parts about being there. And I think it's kind of surprising. Like, for example, I'm really into Bitcoin, and there was a Bitcoin meetup at the co-working space we're at, and we were able to pay for some things in town with Bitcoin. A few restaurants take Bitcoin. And then, so Amanda's into yoga, so she was able to meet up with a few other yoga teachers who she had previously connected with online. We had some friends who were also traveling. Matt and Liz came, and we hung out for a day. We were able to hang out with Nathan. Just a great place to be and kind of like meet friends.
Yeah, and we were also able to connect with Jake and Michelle Schwamp, who been on the podcast. They're the parents of retired toddlers, and they were listeners of the show who just saw from Instagram that we were in Bali, sent us a message. We ended up hanging out with them a couple times. And yeah, it was this like hub where a couple friends were passing through, people that we hadn't met, we connected with. And I think that it would be actually really fun to be on a social visa and be there for 6 to 12 months. Cause I feel like you'd constantly be either connecting with new people, or you'd have people that you meet online or people from home who are just like passing through Bali because it's Bali and people want to come and visit.
Yeah. It's the type of place where it'd be really cool to just have a spare room and have it for like 6 months, and you can just say, hey friends, like come on by.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that if you're more into the scooter life, which if we were to stay there longer, I guess we'd probably have to be, you can get like really cool villas with pools and views of the rice terraces a little bit outside of the city center in Ubud. Since we were not doing scooters, we wanted to be in walking distance of Ubud.
We weren't about that life.
It's not that we weren't about that life. I'm just a little bit scared. But we did actually, when we went down to Sinur, we rented scooters, and it wasn't that bad. Kind of the same way as Myanmar. It just takes a couple hours and you get a little bit more used to it.
Yeah, and this is a good point to talk about transportation around Bali, which when you're there for a while, you want to go to a few other cities. And it's kind of annoying. There's taxi drivers everywhere. This is probably the most annoying part about being in Ubud, or basically anywhere. There's these taxi drivers who just harass you when you're walking around on the street. Taxi, 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 yes, taxi, yes, taxi.
You're like, no. They're like, yes, yes.
Taxi. Constantly. So much like you walk down the main street in Ubud, like 5 to 10 times you're going to get asked if you want a taxi. And probably 3, 4 if you want a massage.
So, maybe 1 or 2 if you want accommodation.
And so if you listen to the podcast, you know we love Uber. It's just a brilliant solution to get around the douchiness of taxi drivers. But Uber is legal in Bali, but the taxi drivers are just, almost thugs. They attack Uber drivers, do all sorts of shitty stuff to them. So Uber drivers don't want to pick you up a lot of places, don't want to drop you off a lot of places. And you kind of have to be like a bit of a sneak if you want to get on Uber, like be in your hotel, get on Uber, and then kind of leave quickly, hop in the car before any taxi drivers notice. And some of the Uber drivers don't want to take you certain places, like Canggu is a really hard place to get an Uber to. So
I think places like Potato Head and Seminyak as well, like Uber drivers will drop you off like close to it, but they won't actually take you to the gates in case they get questioned.
Yeah, and not because it's illegal, but because taxi drivers will make a note of the license plate and then maybe come vandalize their car. Or one Uber driver we had said that he tried to drop someone off in Canggu. Taxi drivers actually attacked him, dragged him out of his car, and took the car. And eventually the police decided to help him and get his car back.
Yeah, it's crazy, really. It's also super frustrating too, because Uber, for example, from, Seminyak to Ubud, which is just over an hour, would cost about 90,000 to 100,000 rupiah. So 9 to 10 Canadian dollars. A taxi driver will charge you 300,000 rupiah, which is 30 Canadian dollars. So the difference in cost is massive. It's not like, it's a small amount. Taxi drivers will charge you 300,000 if you want to go anywhere on the island. Airport to almost anywhere is 300,000. Canggu to Ubud, we paid 300,000 via our guest house person. Whereas, going on Uber, you pay about a third less. And so that's why I think we're big proponents of Uber to begin with. Second of all, it's legal. But third of all, it's way, way cheaper. It's like, why would I pay $30 to drive an hour when Uber will take me for a third of the cost? So we continue to just take Uber and kind of like put a stand against the annoying taxi drivers. But it kind of frustrated me that, it's just these people sitting in the street with a sign that says taxi, kind of harassing people as they go by. Whereas Uber drivers are actively out there taking people from point A to point B. Do you kind of feel the same about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really eye-opening to see that. It's something that when you're in North America, there's kind of this like public campaign against Uber, and cities kind of try to shut it down. But so it kind of gives you the impression that there's like a somewhat legitimate pushback against it. But then when you go somewhere like Bali and you see how thuggish the people preventing Uber are, it's the same
running
thing.
Uber? You mean running the taxis?
Preventing Uber.
Oh, preventing Uber.
It's the same thing. Just in North America, they're able to kind of manipulate city governments to do it for them. So it seems legitimate. But yeah, it was something because we felt a little bit unsafe on scooters, where you're like, oh, it'd be cool to go do, sunset over here. And then you're like, it's going to be expensive if we take a taxi, / we don't want to support them. And it's going to be kind of a hassle to get an Uber once we could probably do it down there, but getting one from there is going to be probably a hassle. And so a couple of times we had a bit more resistance to going and doing things because of the difficulty. I think the best solution is probably to rent a scooter and to get comfortable driving a scooter.
Yeah, I think so.
But there are shenanigans involved with that too, because a lot of times you have to pay bribes to taxi drivers or to police officers, because if you don't have an international driver's license, maybe you're not wearing a helmet or XYZ.
Yeah, I think my advice on that would be, first of all, wear a helmet, because there's basically like no traffic laws in Bali, it seems like. And I think it's pretty dangerous to ride a scooter without a helmet. International driver's license are pretty easy to acquire. And I think if we were staying there longer, we probably would. I think that probably most people are like us. I'm only there for a couple weeks, or I'm only there for a month or two. So why would I pay to get an international driver's license? Yeah, when we did rent a scooter in Sanur, the guest house that we rented it from was kind of just like, make sure you have like 50,000 rupiah on you, because police officers, that's what they want as a bribe. They don't give change. So just make sure you have that amount on you. It's kind of interesting that it's just corrupt like that. People are aware of it, and people just kind of like play into it. It's 5 Canadian dollars. So it's so immaterial for what the hassle is. Yet there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to play into this system. Like, I don't want to just give money when I'm doing nothing wrong. So I think that Bali has a lot of great things about it, but there are kind of these small downsides that you kind of just have to, I guess, be a part of if you want to be there. Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where there's so much nice stuff, but there are those few annoyances that pop up.
Yeah, definitely.
And so we went through the visa renewal process, which is one of those annoyances that pop up. And if you want to go to Bali for longer than a month and are interested in that, definitely shoot us an email. We're happy to provide any more information, but we won't go too deep into it here. But you can extend it for another 30 days, which is what we did.
Yeah, and so the process to extend your visa can be a little bit complicated, or it can be quite simple, just depending on how much money you want to pay. We actually hired a service who basically picked up our passports, took them, did all the paperwork for us. All we had to do was go in for our photos and our fingerprints, and then they delivered our passports back to us. And you have to go an extra time to Denpasar. If you decide to do it yourself, you have to fill out all the paperwork yourself. The total was about $100 to do the entire extension with the company that we hired.
For both of us?
Each. $100 each for the entire process.
Okay.
Including our visa on arrival, $35 fee.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it was worth it to hire somebody to do it because you have to pay for transportation to and from Denpasar unless you have a scooter or if you're staying in Denpasar. But the entire process was pretty smooth, I think, and it was worth
Well, I mean, we
smoothish.
spent almost 2 hours there trying to get fingerprints.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because my number was a couple ahead of Ryan's, and it just happened that the number right before Ryan's, the whole system shut down, and we ended up waiting like 45 minutes for the system to reboot. So I think had that not happened, it would have been a little bit quicker, but I mean, that's, Bali, that's Indonesia for you. Those things happen in developing countries. Overall, though, I think that it was worth it to hire somebody because they met us at the visa office. They did everything for us. We didn't have to worry about language barriers or anything. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things that just, a little bit more money can sometimes save you time, hassle, frustration, all of that.
Yeah, and it's something if you are planning on coming to Southeast Asia and maybe you're thinking about spending 2 months in Indonesia, maybe you would even consider being open to more, I would definitely check into getting a visa in advance because I believe you can get a 6-month visa.
Yeah, a 6-month social visa.
And isn't there a longer...
I think you can get a 12-month social visa. I think tourist visa is only 30 days with one extension.
Because if you want to go, all the visas require you to leave every 2 months, but avoiding that hassle of renewing, if you wanted to spend, I want to spend a month co-working at Bali, and then I want to go travel some of the other islands, then I want to do another month in Bali, it would be probably a lot easier to just have that longer visa in advance and make one trip out of the country.
Yeah, I think that's something we talked about, that the next time we go to Indonesia, we'll look into getting a longer visa just because you basically, you get your visa on arrival upon entry. It's super easy, but then you have to start your process for extension. You can't start it before 2 weeks, but you have to start it kind of right at the 2-week period because it takes 7 working days to do everything. And for us, it actually took a little bit longer than that. And so it's just kind of like the timing is a little bit of a hassle. So just having a longer visa, I think, would be ideal if you're going to spend longer there. The last time I went, I spent exactly 30 days. And so it was really easy because I didn't have to do any of that. So just depending on how long you're going to stay. But so right around our 1 month point, it was, our stay at our first guest house had ran out, and we were just in the process of extending our visa. We actually had the opportunity to go to the Bali Zoo and stay at the Sanctu Villa there, which was a really fun sponsored trip through Voyagen, which is a tour company that we're affiliated with. And that was such a nice, breath of fresh air after working pretty hard for a whole month, hey?
Yeah, that was another time, like the trip down to Seminyak, where just kind of got to relax and have a break and really enjoy the fact that we were in this beautiful place instead of kind of being hunkered down. Yeah,
it was really, really relaxing to go there. And we had 2 nights at a beautiful villa with a private pool. And the Bali Zoo is actually really cool. Zoos aren't usually our thing. If you followed the podcast, you've probably only ever heard us talk about the Australia Zoo. But I actually really enjoyed the Bali Zoo. We got to do breakfast with orangutans and then a night at the zoo. And something that I really liked about the zoo is that it focuses on local animals to Indonesia and surrounding area in Southeast Asia. I really don't like when I go to zoos and, for example, if the Bali Zoo had polar bears, I would have been like, what are you doing? This is not their natural climate. And the lady who showed us around was like, oh yeah, we don't have any of these animals. And I was like, yeah, that's good that you don't have any of these animals because it means you've had to transport them to a climate that's not their own. So I think that's something I really liked about the zoo.
And the Bali Zoo recently changed management, and they're building a lot of the new spaces and bigger enclosures for animals. And we don't know what it was like before, but it seems like they treat the animals really well there, which is something that is important to us. We're both kind of not huge zoo people, but it was fun to go check out and see some see some animals that we'd never seen before, like a tiger.
Yeah. It was really, really cool. And so there's blog posts about our stay at the Sanctu Villa, which is the villa that's right at the Bali Zoo, as well as our time at the zoo. So you can go read about that on the website to learn a little bit more if that's something that interests you. And we've got links to the tour package that we were able to get as well. And so we got back from the Bali Zoo. We went back to Ubud and we changed where we were staying. We had a different location at that point for our last couple of weeks. And I felt sad coming back after this nice stay at the villa where we'd had like our private pool and it was so beautiful and breakfast got delivered to us. But
and it was just ridiculous. A little bit.
What was ridiculous?
Just having all that stuff.
Well, it's just not how we normally travel. Like it was kind of this amazing insight to how like maybe other people travel.
It's like taking a first class flight and then going back to sit in economy the next time and then being like, oh.
Yeah, definitely.
I was happy with this before I had this other experience.
Yeah. And so,
but it was a fun change of pace and kind of an introduction to, I think, the way a lot of people go to travel Bali, where you get these amazing villas because they aren't very expensive. And if you're just there on vacation, you can afford to stay at these places.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing to talk about because you were talking to your parents and your dad knew somebody who was going on this trip to Bali, and this person was spending like an outrageous amount of money in Canadian dollars on his stay in Bali. And you were like, we're paying like $500 a month for our accommodation, Canadian, like $350 US, which is so reasonable for a month's worth of rent. It's interesting because in a place like Bali, it does have this massive tourist economy and tourism happening there. And you can spend a lot of money on places you stay, but you can also find really affordable places.
And so Bali is a island. Most of the people on Bali are Hindu, and Indonesia is a Muslim country, but it's a Hindu island, has their own distinct, unique culture. And so a lot of people, when you're on trips there, and we did a trip around the island to see some of the temples and more interesting sites. So we went on a day trip with some friends and visited some waterfalls and visited a really popular temple in a lake.
Yeah, and we'll put the names to those in the show notes. So if you guys want to check that out, you can. And there are so many different temples you can visit. We obviously didn't get to them all. Pick and choose what you want to do if that's kind of your thing. There's plenty in Ubud that you can go visit. There's lots in the surrounding area. There's rice terraces all over the place. Some are, within walking distance of Ubud town, whereas others you can drive a little bit further. We had the opportunity to see the biggest one in Bali, which was really, really cool. It's amazing to think that people have set up these rice terraces and they've structured them so that the water, flows properly and whatnot, so that they're able to make all the rice for exports.
And rice terraces are kind of one of the iconic views of Bali. You can get some pretty amazing pictures of the rice fields kind of tiered down, the palm trees and jungly looking atmosphere around.
Yeah, it's central Bali for sure.
Yeah. And so towards the end of our time in Ubud, how were you feeling about leaving, moving on?
Yeah, so I really loved our time there. I think that I kind of felt more at home than I had expected to. After our first month, I was happy that we decided to stay a second month and to fully dedicate our time to being in Ubud, because I was loving the co-working space and the people we were meeting through that and the community events and practicing yoga again regularly. Like, it kind of felt like I was getting everything that I'd been missing from our travels by staying put in Ubud. And it was this community with great food, and I was feeling really healthy. And I started to feel sad towards the end that we were leaving. And, just with our upcoming plans to Japan, it didn't really make sense to extend our visa again or to do a visa run just to stay for, 10 more days or something like that. So I knew we had to move on. But I was feeling a little bit sad to be leaving. What about you?
Yeah, about the same. There's part of me that was excited about moving on to here in Kuala Lumpur and getting some of those city things that we hadn't had for a while. But like you said, we set up a really good routine for ourselves over those 2 months. We both really improved our health. We probably went to about 30 yoga and meditation classes over that period of time. Eating healthy, doing really well, set up good routines for ourselves. So it was a really good experience. Could have probably stayed a while longer, but I think it's one of those good time frames where you leave still wanting a bit more. You're not quite done with it yet, but I could see there was some excitement about going to new places and trying new things.
Yeah, I think it's always really interesting with traveling and finding a balance between having a regular routine and then switching things up, because we've talked about how routines can be really detrimental and why, travel can be really beneficial for that. But then at the same time, there's something really great about having, good routines. So having 2 months to set up really good habits and good routines in this great place was awesome. But I think that it's also good to switch it up and kind of, look at what you could change out of that. Like, oh, okay, what could I be doing differently? And it's nice being in a city where there's a little bit more amenities. Having a kitchen is nice so we can cook again and save a bit of money in that regard. I'm definitely going to miss $2 wheatgrass shots though, for sure.
Yeah. And it was, I think, a good experience for us because going into it, we'd both been kind of craving a bit of home a bit more, especially towards the end of Myanmar. And then going into Ubud, I feel like we really satisfied that by just eating well, taking care of ourselves, being productive. Kind of got all that stuff accomplished without, going home. We kind of talked about it a bit on a previous episode, but sometimes the things you're craving about home aren't actually to do with home. And we kind of had that experience in Ubud.
Yeah, it's interesting because the things that I were missing were, my regular yoga practice at a good yoga studio and eating healthy. And I was definitely able to get that in Ubud, which was nice. I think that it was really great having sort of a regular work routine because we were able to get a lot of really great stuff done. And one thing that we had on our goals was to complete a yoga for men course, which is something that we've been trying to accomplish for 6 months unsuccessfully. So we finally launched that. We actually have a special promo code for World Wanderers listeners. So if you're a man who's kind of into yoga or maybe new to yoga, we've got a promo code in the show notes. It'll also be in our newsletter. So if you're not a part of that, sign up for the newsletter and we'll get that sent out to you. And so it just felt really good to complete something that had been a goal for a while. And I think we had quite a few things like that where it's like, okay, I've been wanting to do this. Okay, finally got it done. Okay, taxes need to be done. Okay, great. We're going to do those.
Yeah. And I think that travel, especially the way we're doing it now, is you kind of have to find a balance between adventure and purpose. And the pendulum, I think we went through a swing to Myanmar, which was adventure, and then a swing to Ubud, which was kind of purpose. And now we're kind of, going to Japan, having a bit more of that adventure, having more fun. And we learned quite a bit about how we work. So hopefully we can find that middle ground a bit more going forward.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you think about moving to a new place and how you can maintain those good routines that you've set up, which was one of the main concerns that I think we both had about leaving Bali is okay, we've set up these really good habits of going to yoga every other day. How can we maintain that in a place where the yoga studio is not within a 5-minute walk with, 10 classes in a day, which is something that's kind of interesting about working and traveling. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important learning benefit of traveling. And I think of traveling generally, but also working with traveling. You're just putting yourself in all these different environments. So you kind of realize the importance of your environment more because you're changing it. If you're at home and you're staying in the same place for 3 years, you're not going to notice how much changing your apartment changes your routines or how much changing your neighborhood changes it. And so traveling, for example, we built this really great yoga routine, but that was kind of dependent on having awesome yoga classes at a cool yoga studio that's right near where we are. And now we're in an apartment, no yoga studios close, we've got our own mats, and we're trying to set up a new habit of doing it here, but it's a bit difficult. And then we're going to go somewhere else. But because you keep switching, you have to keep aware of how your habits are changing if you want to keep habits in. So I think that's one of the great benefits of travel is learning this about yourself and how to set your life up in the way that is most enriching for you.
Yeah, definitely. You put that really well. And so the last thing that we did while we were in Bali was we made a trip over to Gili Trawangan, which is actually one of 3 Gili islands off the coast of Lombok, which is a different island in Indonesia. And you can get picked up right from Ubud. They have transportation services that take you right to the port. There's a couple of different ports that you can go from. You can go from Ahmed or I think Senur, but we went from Padang Bai, which is about an hour and a half by car to the east of Ubud. And then we took a ferry about an hour and a half to get to Gili Trawangan, which is where we stayed for 3 nights.
Yeah, and the Gili Islands are some of the most picturesque islands I think I've ever seen. Kind of turquoise blue water, sandy beaches, and the different islands kind of have a bit of a different culture on each of them. The tourist culture, not the original culture. Gili T is kind of become that like bit of a backpacker, slummy party island. And then I think Gili Air is more of a relaxing, chill island, and Gili
Mino
is kind of a middle ground.
Yeah, one of them is the family island. One of them's the honeymoon island. I can't remember which one is which, but we did hear from people who commented on photos and reached out to us that lots of people prefer Gili Mino and Gili Air to Gili Trawangan, which I could probably see. I enjoyed our time in Gili T, but it definitely is a little bit more like, you know, there's cigarette smoke everywhere. It seems like everyone's smoking. There's clubs that have different party nights.
Yeah, everyone's trying to sell you mushrooms.
Yeah. And so we didn't really engage with any of that. We mostly just ate at the good restaurants that we could find, walked around the islands, hung out in the sun and relaxed was basically what we did. And it was the perfect 3 days kind of to unwind from our 2 months in Bali and to kind of just cap it off on a high.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous that you're saying unwind from our months in Bali.
Yeah, that probably does sound a little bit ridiculous to anyone who's listening from a...
But we didn't really go to the beach. We had that one beach day in Senur, kind of in Seminyak because we were at a beach club. But we weren't technically at the beach. Anyways, so in Gili T, we were able to go out and read in the sun and kind of get that more of a prototypical Bali experience. And I think if we were going back, we probably would go to Gili Air or Gili Mino instead of Gili T. But it's worth checking out. There's some good restaurants there, some good beaches. You can walk around the island. But if partying's not your thing, a lot of the guest houses you stay at, there's going to be music bumping until 3 a.m. You're going to see people, running around the streets, making noise. Everybody's smoking. So there's some downsides to being there. Yeah,
I think regardless of what you choose, though, it's a good time. It's nice and relaxing. We had a great stay at Martas Bali Guest House. There's a blog post up on theworldwanders.com about that, and also a blog post up about what we did on Gili T in general. So if you're interested in that, you can find more on the website. So I think that kind of concludes our 2 months in Bali. Do you have any final words of wisdom or things you'd like to share?
Words of wisdom. So the thing that's, I think, really cool for me about Bali was just seeing this experience of all these people who are working remotely from this really cool tropical island. It's like Chiang Mai, but a little bit different because it's just almost a little bit more. I was going to say the word ridiculous. It's this beautiful vacation island where you can show up and, stay connected and do work back home. I feel like it's kind of like the future in a lot of ways, where you can have this great lifestyle, but still stay connected to home and not really sacrifice much, but gain a whole lot because you can eat great food and go to the beach and do all this other stuff, go surfing, etc. So it was really cool to see that and to get a little bit more in touch with that culture. You find out a lot of people came from Chiang Mai to Bali and are going to Penang and then back to Chiang Mai afterwards. So
we're onwards to Ho Chi Minh City.
Yeah, so that was a cool experience for me. And I think I learned a lot about how to get stuff done and just how much more satisfied I am when I feel and fulfilled when I feel like I'm actually creating something. And that's something I think that often lacks and often eats at me when we're just purely traveling and not doing anything else.
Yeah, I can definitely agree and relate to that. I think it's taken me a couple months of this trip to like firmly be on board with like, okay, routines are important. Staying put is important. I think I talked about this a bit in the Chiang Mai episode because I was like, yes, let's just like travel like we used to and go really fast, but still like
we can do both at once.
Yeah. Do work and make money, which is like not really realistic. But I absolutely loved our 2 months in Bali. It's definitely on my radar to get a longer social visa next time around, to stay longer, to have, more time at the co-working space, to meet more people, set up more of a community. I feel like Bali, or Ubud specifically, meets my needs for healthy food, yoga, cool people doing similar things to us, while still having sort of like the adventure and climate of being abroad.
Yeah. So something that we've been finding is that we kind of need to create a balance for ourselves where we are traveling and working at the same time, but we kind of need to switch focus to be working and to traveling. And Bali provides a really good opportunity to do that because you can do stuff like, be set up in Ubud at a co-working space, and then, okay, maybe we're going to take a weekend and go to Sanur or go to Seminyak, or even you can, there's great co-working spaces in a number of places. So it's a cool island to just be, because you can go out and have these really cool day trips or really cool, relaxing adventures to the beach, but also stay connected. So I think if anyone was like, okay, I'm going to take a month off out of the office to work remotely from anywhere in the world, where would you recommend doing it from? Chiang Mai is up there for me, but I think Bali and specifically Ubud would be right at the top of my list for places to go do that. Yeah, definitely. Me as well. So that's basically it. How about you?
I think that concludes everything for me. You said everything I was thinking. Awesome. So you can find out more, obviously, at theworldwanders.com. We'll have lots of blog posts and more information about everything that we did in Bali. So you can find out more details there if you feel like anything is missing from this episode. And thanks so much for listening.
Ciao. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanders.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanders.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.